The year was 1865, and the Wyoming frontier was a land stitched together by blood, wind, and the desperate prayers of men who dared call it home. Snow clawed through the trees like a living thing, biting at the heels of the girl who ran. Her breath tore from her lungs in short, ragged bursts, her boots slipping on the icy ground, her skirts torn and crusted with red. Behind her, the forest loomed, black, silent, and cruel. Clara Whitlock did not look back. Branches slapped her face. A root snagged her boot and sent her sprawling. She caught herself on trembling hands, the pain a dim thing beneath the pounding of her heart. Her father's voice echoed in her ears, not in words, but in the last gurgled breath he'd taken in her arms. She'd seen the musket flash, smelled the powder, felt the warmth of his blood as it soaked through her dress. She got up. She kept moving. There was a light ahead, flickering through the trees like a star barely clinging to the heavens. A cabin or a trapper's hut, anything that might hold fire and shelter. Her vision blurred. Snow thickened, a white curtain trying to smother the world. She staggered into a clearing, feet numb, lashes iced over. The door stood only 10 paces away. She lifted a hand, knocked once, twice, and collapsed against the frame. The wood was rough and cold, like the hand that caught her as the world tipped sideways and went dark. When Clara woke, warmth was the first thing she felt. Heavy blankets, the scent of wood smoke and pine pitch, a crackling fire. She opened her eyes slowly. The man stood near the hearth, back half turned, a rifle propped by the door and a tin kettle hissing softly on the coals. His silhouette was broad-shouldered, motionless, except for the slow turn of his head, as if he'd sensed her stirring without needing to see it. Their eyes met. He had the look of a man carved from the same rock as the mountains, tall, lean, weather-worn. One side of his face bore a scar that ran from temple to jaw. His eyes were blue, cold as the river in spring thaw, but not unkind. "You're lucky," he said, voice low and gravel-edged. "Storm like that would have finished you." Clara struggled to sit up. Her limbs ached. Her hair, loose and tangled, clung to her cheeks. She was still wearing the blood-stained dress. It had dried stiff. "I need to go," she rasped. The man didn't move. "You won't last an hour out there. Snow's still coming. You'll stay." She faltered, breath catching. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "My name's Clara." He nodded once. "Colt." She waited, but he said nothing more. The silence stretched, thick with unsaid things. She looked around. The cabin was small but sturdy. A bed in the corner, a rough-hewn table, shelves lined with jars. Everything smelled faintly of smoke and tan hide. It was the kind of place a man built with his hands and kept because the world offered nothing better. Clara sat up straighter, feeling every scrape and bruise bloom in protest. "I can work," she said suddenly, her voice steadier than before. "I'll earn my keep till the snow clears." Colt didn't answer right away. Then he gave a small grunt, half agreement, half indifference, and turned back to the fire. "You hungry?" She nodded. He ladled out stew from a cast-iron pot, slid it across the table. She caught the scent, venison maybe. Her stomach clenched with hunger, but she hesitated. "You always help strangers?" she asked. His eyes flicked toward her. "No." She ate in silence after that. Over the next days, the storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, the world narrowed to small routines. Colt said little. He rose early, chopped wood with precise swings, mended traps, cleaned his rifle. Clara helped where she could, washing dishes, boiling water, drying herbs. Her fingers were raw, her body sore, but the work steadied her. She did not tell him the truth. Not yet. Her father's murder haunted her dreams. She'd seen the blue-coated men ride in, guns drawn, shouting about traitors and deserters. She and her father had hidden in the root cellar. But the floorboards creaked. The door was wrenched open. One man had hesitated, young, unsure, but the leader with hard eyes and gold trim on his cuffs had raised his pistol and fired. Her father hadn't even screamed, just looked at her once and then fell. She told Colt none of this. Instead, she said her father had died in a fire, that their house had burned. that she'd wandered for days. A lie, but one that bought her time. Colt didn't question her. If he doubted the story, he kept it to himself. One afternoon, while she was sweeping, she noticed a small tin box tucked beside the bed. Inside was a locket, worn and faded. It opened with a creak, revealing a miniature painting, one of those dainty things women use to commission before photography. A woman with kind eyes, a child in her lap. Clara closed it quickly. She didn't ask. That night, by the fire, Colt caught her staring. "They're gone," he said simply. "Raiders. Kansas border 3 winters ago." Clara looked down. "I'm sorry." He shrugged, the movement tight. "War leaves holes." His voice was rawer than she'd heard it. Not grief exactly, grief was too loud. This was something deeper. Settled, buried like a broken blade in the gut. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking. The way he moved like a man used to danger. How he always kept the rifle near, never fully relaxed. How he walked the perimeter of the cabin each dusk, checking for prints in the snow. And yet there was kindness, too. A gentleness in how he checked her bandaged wrist, or how he added more wood to the fire when she shivered. Not softness, but control. A man who knew violence and chose not to use it. Most of the time. They went hunting on the 6th morning. The air was bitter, the kind that peeled the skin off your teeth if you smiled too wide. Snow reached past their knees. Colt handed her a rifle. "You ever shoot?" She hesitated. "Once." "Then you'll do it again." They tracked prints through the woods, rabbit or fox, maybe. Clara moved carefully, her breath a white fog before her. Colt gestured silently, showing her how to hold the rifle steady. She watched him, his focus, his stillness, and mimicked it. The shot cracked like lightning. The rabbit tumbled. Clara lowered the rifle, heart pounding. "I hit it." "You did." He didn't smile, but his voice held something lighter. They ate well that night. Colt even let a corner of his mouth twitch when she made a dry remark about a stew. For a moment, the storm outside seemed far away. Later, after he'd gone to sleep, Clara sat by the fire, tracing the lines of her father's drawing with trembling fingers. A sketch of the mountains they'd planned to visit in spring. The paper was smudged, the ink faded. Tears welled up, silent and fierce. She turned away from the fire, pressing the paper to her lips, her shoulders shaking. She didn't hear Colt rise, but she felt the weight of a blanket drape over her. He didn't speak, just sat beside her for a while, staring into the flames. They were splitting logs when the cougar came. It happened fast, too fast. Colt had gone to check the trapline. Clara remained behind, axe in hand, the pile of wood growing steadily. She heard the low growl a second before it charged from the tree line. Her scream died in her throat. The animal was huge, muscles coiled, eyes wild with hunger. It bared its teeth, crouching. Clara stumbled back, grabbing the rifle, but her hands fumbled. She aimed, fired. Missed. The shot rang out useless. Then Colt appeared, silent and sudden, like a shadow breaking from the trees. Bang! The cougar dropped mid-leap, twitching once before going still. Colt lowered his rifle. "You all right?" She nodded numbly. "Yes, I missed." He didn't scold, didn't say a word, just walked over, checked the animal, then turned back to her. "You did fine," he said, and that was all. But it mattered more than she could say. That night, Clara watched him sharpen his knife by the fire. Sparks danced in the air. The storm had passed, but the cold remained. "Colt," she said quietly, "why'd you come back so fast?" He glanced up, felt something was off. "You always trust your gut?" He nodded. "It's kept me alive." She hesitated. "Then, you ever kill a man you didn't mean to?" The question hung in the air like a noose. Colt met her eyes. His face didn't change. "Yes." A long silence. Only the fire crackled. Clara turned back to the flames, but her thoughts raced. Her hands trembled, though not from the cold. She didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, the snow had stopped. Clara stepped outside into the pale dawn. The forest was quiet, blanketed in white, the trees heavy with frost. The cougar lay nearby, stiff and half-buried. She looked at it for a long time. Colt joined her after a while. He didn't say anything. She turned to him. I think I'll leave tomorrow. He didn't try to stop her. Instead, he said, I'll take you to the old trail. It's safer than cutting through the valley. She nodded. They stood there, two figures outlined against the morning light. Strangers. Survivors. Something almost like trust between them. Almost, but not enough. Not yet. The fire snapped in the hearth, throwing long shadows across the cabin walls as wind howled against the seams like a pack of wolves sniffing for weakness. Clara sat in the rocking chair, mending one of Colt's shirts, the needle trembling between her fingers more from the weight of unspoken truths than from the cold. Colt leaned against the doorframe, oiling his rifle, eyes distant. He hadn't spoken much since she told him she planned to leave. Not out of anger. Colt didn't seem the kind to feel that in the usual way, but something quieter, heavier, as if he were used to people disappearing. You ever miss the world? She asked, surprising herself. Colt didn't look up. This is the world. No, I mean before. Before the war. Before everything burned. He paused, then set the rifle aside. I don't remember it clear enough to miss it. Clara nodded, eyes downcast. I do. He moved toward the fire, crouched to stir the embers. You lost more than a house, didn't you? She felt the prickle of tears but blinked them away. My father was everything. Colt's jaw tightened. You said it was fire. Clara hesitated. It was, just not the kind that starts from a lantern left tipped over. It wore blue, carried Union pistols. His eyes narrowed, and she saw something shift in his stance, like a bear catching wind of a hunter. Where? Black Hollow, little town near the river. His silence sharpened. I know what it sounds like, she added quickly, blaming soldiers, but I saw them. I saw the man who did it. He wore a gold-trimmed coat. He didn't hesitate. Colt straightened slowly, his face unreadable. Gold trim, you say? Clara nodded. Captain, maybe. He had this look, cold, controlled. His hand drifted to his belt knife, then away again. War does things to men, he said softly, even the ones in charge, sometimes especially them. He said no more that night. The next day, the sun returned, watery and pale, but enough to melt the edges of snow. Clara woke early and began boiling water for washing. Colt was already outside, mending a broken snare. She watched him from the window. His movements were efficient, but there was a tightness in his shoulders, a rigidity that hadn't been there before. Her words had unsettled something in him. A memory, maybe, or guilt. The knock came at noon. 3 raps, sharp and sure. Clara stiffened, heart slamming against her ribs. No one should be here. Colt grabbed his rifle before opening the door. A tall man stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. His beard was streaked with gray, and his eyes flicked from Colt to Clara with practiced calculation. Colt Avery, he said, with a drawl like rusted nails. Well, I'll be damned. Colt didn't smile. Matthew. Didn't reckon I'd find you still breathing, Matthew said, stepping fully inside without invitation. He dropped his saddlebag on the floor. Nice place. Cozy. Clara stayed near the wall, silent. Matthew's eyes found her. Company? Huh. Didn't peg you for the domestic type. She's none of your business, Colt said flatly. Matthew raised his hands. Easy now. I came to trade, not stir the coals. Colt nodded toward the table. Set it down. Then go. Matthew shrugged, pulled out a few tins, some bullets, a bottle of whiskey. Then he leaned back in the chair, boots up. I was down at Fort Walcott last month. Heard a story, he said casually, about a captain who led a raid on Black Hollow. Place burned so fast they said the creek ran red. Heard the man in charge went ghost right after. Deserted. Vanished. Can't blame him, really. Things got messy. Clara froze. Colt's face was stone. Matthew grinned. That man's name was Captain Colt Avery. The room fell silent. The wind outside dropped like it was holding its breath. Colt moved slowly, deliberately. He picked up the bottle of whiskey, poured a glass, then set it in front of Matthew without a word. Matthew lifted it in mock salute. You got a new life here, huh? Hunting. Hiding. Pretty girls stitching your shirts. Clara's voice cut through the air. Is it true? Colt didn't turn to her. He stared into the fire, the orange glow casting deep hollows beneath his eyes. I led the company, he said at last. Black Hollow was on the list. We were told there were sympathizers, hidden caches. Orders were to torch it clean and fast. Clara's knees weakened. She grabbed the edge of the table. My father wasn't a soldier, she whispered. He was a carpenter. He built coffins, for God's sake. Colt's voice cracked. I didn't know. I didn't see names. We kicked in doors, we cleared buildings, but I never pulled the trigger on a man in his own cellar. But you gave the order. His silence was answer enough. Matthew chuckled darkly. She didn't know? Well, ain't that a twist? Clara turned on him. You were there too? Just passing through, he said with a smirk. But I saw what was left. Colt moved like lightning. He slammed Matthew against the wall, the knife at his throat. Say another word. Matthew grinned, unafraid. You got soft. Colt shoved him back, stepped away. Clara grabbed her coat, her vision swimming. I'm leaving. You won't make it far, Colt said. I don't care. He reached for her arm. She flinched. Don't touch me. The door slammed behind her. She plunged into the snow, boots crunching, heart thundering. Trees blurred past. Her breath came in ragged gasps. He was the man. The one her father had died because of. The one who had led the fire and smoke into their quiet town. And she had trusted him. Slept under his roof. Smiled at his quiet strength. Fool. She stumbled as the wind picked up, sleet slicing across her face. The forest darkened. She didn't care. Let the cold take her. Let the wolves find her. It would be better than the hollow that had opened in her chest. A creek appeared ahead, frozen but cracked with dark veins. She didn't see the weakness until it gave way. The ice shattered. She went under. Cold closed in like iron chains. Her scream was swallowed. Water surged, numbing everything. She kicked, fought, but the current pulled at her limbs, heavy with skirts and panic. A hand grabbed her wrist. She surfaced, gasping, choking on air and ice. Colt dragged her out, his coat, already soaked, his face grim. He didn't speak. He wrapped her in his arms, carried her back through the woods while she shook and sobbed against his chest. By the time they reached the cabin, Clara was barely conscious. When she woke, it was dark again. A fire roared nearby. She lay wrapped in every blanket the cabin had. Her skin burned from frostbite and bruising. Her lips were cracked. Colt sat nearby, shirt off, wounds across his arms from hauling her out. He was stitching a gash along his forearm with calm precision. She tried to sit up. He didn't stop her. I should have told you, he said. She closed her eyes. Why didn't you? I thought you deserved peace. I thought I could give it. You gave me warmth. Then you gave me the worst truth I've ever known. Colt didn't flinch. I didn't know who you were. Not until you said Black Hollow. By then I trusted you. He nodded slowly. I don't expect forgiveness. You won't get it. I know. Silence fell, heavy and bitter. But I also don't think you're the one who pulled the trigger, she said after a while. You gave the order, and that's its own weight. But you weren't the man who looked my father in the eyes. No. Who was? Colt stared at the fire. There was a sergeant. Name was Harlan Grieve. Mean son of a bitch. Enjoyed the blood. He disobeyed a dozen times, did worse than orders required. Last I heard, he ran with deserters, maybe out near Red Ridge. Clara's fingers clenched around the blanket. Then it wasn't you. I'm not innocent, he said, but I didn't murder your father. She looked away. I don't know if that makes a difference. I'll leave if you ask me to. She didn't answer. Not then. Instead, she turned her face to the wall and wept. That night, neither of them slept. 2 days later, Clara stood outside as pale sunlight cut across the trees. Her hands were steadier. Her thoughts were not. She heard him behind her. I'll ride south, Colt said. There's a trader station a few miles downriver. I'll leave you supplies. I'm not asking you to go, she said. He blinked. I haven't decided, she went on. What to feel, what to do. But if what you say is true, then The man who killed my father is still out there. Colt nodded once. He is, and I want to find him. This time he didn't hesitate. Then I'll go with you. She turned to him. Why? Because it's the only way I can make this right. Don't expect redemption. I don't, he said simply. I expect justice. Clara looked back toward the woods, the path ahead dark and uncertain. Her heart still ached. Her trust was a broken thing. But somewhere, deep beneath the ruin, a spark flickered. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But purpose. And for now, that was enough. The road to Red Ridge was lined with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that crept under your coat and sat heavy in your bones. Clara rode beside Colt, her hands firm on the reins, her eyes scanning every shadow. The mountains loomed to the west, dusted with snow, and the bare trees stretched like skeletal fingers toward the pale winter sky. Neither of them spoke much. They had run out of easy words days ago. They moved fast, stopping only to rest the horses and sleep in turns. Colt said little about the man they hunted, only that Harlan Grieve had once been a sergeant under his command, cruel, unpredictable, and too eager with fire. Clara didn't ask for more. She didn't want details. She only wanted the truth to have a face, and maybe, if fate allowed it, justice to have a final breath. By the 5th day, they reached the outskirts of Red Ridge. It was a dry, broken place, the kind of settlement people didn't go to unless they had something to hide. The buildings leaned like they were tired of standing. A saloon, a smithy, a few scattered homes. Clara could feel eyes watching from every doorway and shadow. Colt dismounted, adjusted his coat, and handed her a small Colt Navy revolver. Keep it close. She nodded, slipping it into the pocket sewn into her skirts. The weight felt strange, but not unwelcome. Inside the saloon, the air reeked of whiskey, pipe smoke, and sweat. A cracked mirror behind the bar reflected the dim oil lamps. Half a dozen men lounged at the tables, some playing cards, some just staring. One of them looked up, tall, wide in the shoulders, a gray beard tucked under his chin like a butcher's apron. Colt walked straight to the bar. I'm looking for a man named Grieve. The bartender paused, wiped the counter once. A lot of men passed through. What's he look like? Carries a limp. Right leg. Scar under his left eye. Would have been Union, used to wear stripes. The bartender's jaw tightened. You best be gone before sunset, mister. Clara stepped beside Colt. So he's here. No one answered, but the room grew still in that heavy way just before a fight starts. Then a voice from the back, gravelly, half amused. I wondered if you'd come, Captain. A figure emerged from the shadows. Harlan Grieve looked like a man who'd drunk death and decided he liked the taste. His coat was dusty, his eyes sharp, that scar Clara remembered cut across his cheek like a crooked smile. Colt didn't move. Harlan, still carrying that guilt like it's a damn medal? Grieve said, crossing his arms. You were the one gave the order. You disobeyed it. You went door to door when I told you to clear the perimeter. You shot civilians. Civilians hiding rifles, Grieve snapped. You think they were innocent? They'd have slit our throats the second your back was turned. Clara stepped forward. You shot my father. In the cellar. He wasn't armed. Grieve looked at her, eyebrows raised. I remember you. Little girl, shaking under the stairs. You screamed when he dropped. Thought you were a rabbit. Colt's voice was flat. You've got two choices, Harlan. Stand trial or face us now. Grieve laughed. You think there's a trial for men like us? You think some judge in a neat coat gives a damn what happened at Black Hollow? Behind him, two men stood, friends of his, no doubt. The room shifted. Tension built like thunder in the ground. Clara's fingers found the grip of her revolver. You came here to die, Grieve said, stepping back. And you brought her. Shame. Then everything exploded. Gunfire cracked the silence. Colt shoved Clara behind a table as the mirror shattered and bullets screamed through the air. One of Grieve's men dropped, clutching his chest. The other fired blindly, missing wide. Colt rolled, fired twice. One shot hit, the second missed. Clara raised her revolver. Her heart pounded. So loud, she barely heard the blast as she squeezed the trigger. Grieve staggered back, blood blooming across his shoulder. He snarled, drew his pistol, and aimed at Colt, but Clara moved faster. Her second shot caught him just below the ribs. He crumpled. The silence afterward was deeper than before. Smoke drifted across the room. The barkeep ducked low behind the bar. A bottle tipped over, spilling whiskey across the floor. Clara stood slowly, gun shaking in her grip. Her hands were red. Her ears rang. She looked down at Grieve, now groaning in pain, eyes furious. "You don't get to crawl away," she said. "You get to feel it." Colt walked forward, looking down at his former sergeant. "You'll hang for what you did. I'll see to it." Grieve coughed, blood on his lips. "You think this changes anything? The dead stay dead." Colt crouched beside him. "No, but maybe now the living can breathe." They stayed only long enough to ensure Grieve was taken into custody. A marshal from the next territory would arrive in a day. Until then, Colt stood guard while Clara sat near the window, watching the wind kick dust down the empty streets. Neither of them spoke that night. They'd crossed something together, a line they couldn't retreat from. It wasn't just vengeance. It was reckoning. For her. For him. They left before dawn. Back on the trail, the sky bloomed with soft oranges and pale blues. Clara rode in silence, her eyes fixed ahead. Colt's presence beside her felt different now. He wasn't just a man from her past. He wasn't even her savior anymore. He was something more difficult, more real. When they camped that night near a frozen river, she finally spoke. "You didn't have to follow me to Red Ridge." Colt poked the fire with a stick. "Didn't feel right letting you face that alone." He said something that you still carry guilt. "I do." "Why?" "Because it was my watch. My command. I should have stopped him." She looked at him across the firelight, his features carved in orange and shadow. "Maybe guilt's what makes you human. Maybe. Or maybe it just keeps a man from sleeping." She leaned back, closed her eyes for a long moment. "He remembered me. I didn't expect that. You made an impression. I thought I'd feel peace when he fell, but I don't." He didn't answer. She continued. "It wasn't the shot. It wasn't justice. It was the look on his face. Like none of it mattered. Like I was still a child. You're not. I know. But part of me still wanted to hear him say he was sorry. Some men don't get to die sorry." She opened her eyes again. "Do you?" He looked up at the stars, then back at her. "I don't know yet." Spring arrived slow and stubborn in the hills. The snow melted in patches, revealing dead grass and brittle leaves beneath. Clara and Colt returned to the cabin, its walls weathered but still standing, still waiting. She walked through the door like it was the first time. The place felt smaller now, not in a bad way, but like it had been folded tighter, reshaped by memory. The shadows on the floor reminded her of where she'd cried, the hearth where she'd found warmth, the chair where she'd mended his shirt while pretending not to stare. Colt set down the packs, started a fire, then busied himself sharpening tools outside. Clara moved through the space slowly. She opened the tin box again. The locket lay where it had always been. She stared at the painting, the woman, the child, and thought of the home they never returned to. She understood now, more than she wanted to. That night, they sat at the table without speaking for a while. The silence between them was no longer sharp. It had softened into something familiar. "I thought I'd leave once this was over," she said finally. "That once Grieve was gone, I'd have nothing left to hold me here." Colt looked up. "But I don't think that's true anymore." He said nothing. He just waited. "I've lived my whole life chasing safety. My father tried to build it for us, piece by piece. You tried to give it to me, in your way. But now, I think I want to build it for myself." He nodded slowly. "And where would you start?" She met his eyes. "Right here." The fire cracked. Outside, night stretched over the hills, quiet and clean. She reached across the table, laid her hand over his. His fingers, rough and scarred, closed around hers. They sat that way until the fire burned low. Weeks passed, then months. The garden came first, a rough patch of earth just beyond the porch. Clara planted with stubborn hope, coaxing green from the thawing ground. She caught Colt, watching her, sometimes the ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. He built a fence. She fixed a roof. They traded with travelers and split chores in silence, broken only by the clink of spoons and the hush of evening fires. And though they rarely spoke of the past, it hung between them, no longer a weight, but a shadow, something acknowledged, something shared. One morning, Clara stood by the creek, watching the mist rise. The air smelled of wet earth and pine. Behind her, Colt stepped into view, a blanket draped over his shoulder. "Coffee's ready." She turned. "I was thinking about my father." Colt nodded. "What about him?" "How he used to say the frontier wasn't just land, it was a kind of mirror. It showed you who you were when everything else was gone." Colt looked toward the trees. "And what did it show you?" She smiled faintly. "That I'm not made of glass." He stepped beside her, quiet. "He'd be proud of you." She exhaled, slow. "I think so." A bird called overhead. The wind moved the grass in slow ripples. Colt turned to her. "You ever think about leaving still?" "No," she said. "I think this is where I belong." A long moment passed. He took her hand. They walked back to the cabin, side by side, footsteps soft against the earth. And behind them, spring bloomed, quietly, boldly, as if nothing had ever burned. And maybe, just maybe, something better had taken root. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this: the frontier didn't just forge men of war, it forged survivors who chose who they'd become. And when the dust settled, it wasn't vengeance that endured, but the quiet, unflinching will to begin again. The wind carried an unfamiliar scent that morning, smoke, faint but bitter. Colt caught it before Clara did, half buried beneath the scent of wet earth and pine sap. He stood up from the shed where he was fixing the wheel axle, narrowing his eyes toward the horizon. Clara was crouched by the chickens, basket half filled with eggs, the loose end of her braid brushing her collar. "Colt," she asked when she saw his expression. "Get inside," he said, voice low, tight. She didn't ask why, just dropped the basket and moved. The chickens scattered. He followed, ducked inside the cabin, and reached for the rifle behind the door. The same Spencer he'd carried through Missouri and Tennessee. Clara locked the window shutters without needing to be told. She checked the revolver in her apron pocket. Her fingers trembled, once, then steadied. The fire had been set northeast. Deliberate. Not a wildfire, not this time of year. A signal or a trap. They waited, breath held in the stillness. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind set nerves on edge. Then hoofbeats. Colt moved to the side window and peered through a sliver between boards. 3 riders, one on a paint horse, another tall and lean with a red scarf. The third rode, like he owned the land beneath his saddle. Clara saw Colt's jaw tighten. "You know them?" "Only the man in the middle. His name's Wade Kellum." "Friend of Greaves?" "No," Colt said. "Worse. Used to wear a badge down in San Cielo. Ran a crooked jail, made his coin off bounty games and backroom deals. Last I heard, he was run out by the townsfolk when a preacher's daughter vanished." Clara's stomach turned. "What's he doing here?" "Looking for something." Colt's voice dropped. "Or someone." The 3 men reined in before the cabin. Wade Kellum dismounted slowly, drawing off his gloves like a man unhurried by consequence. He called out in a voice smooth as aged tobacco, "Morning. We mean no harm. Just passing through." Colt stepped out onto the porch, rifle lowered but ready. Clara stood in the doorway behind him. "You got a way of passing through that smells like burnt pine," Colt said. Wade smiled. "Ah, that. Signal fire. For a friend trailing us. Long trail, needed a beacon. Ain't looking to stir trouble." Colt didn't answer. "You must be Colt Avery," Wade said. "Heard your name in Missouri. Folks said you died with your captain's stripes. Sometimes death's quieter than truth." "Well said." Wade stepped forward a pace. "And you must be Miss Clara Foster." Clara froze. Colt's stance shifted just slightly. Wade tipped his hat to her. "Word travels. You made a name for yourself in Red Ridge." "I shot a man who deserved it," she replied. "Didn't say he didn't. But men like Grieve had friends. Powerful ones. Folks who took offense at his end. Clara stepped onto the porch. He murdered innocent people. He didn't deserve mercy. Wade's smile faded. Problem is, mercy's got less to do with justice and more to do with who writes the laws. Colt raised the rifle slightly. You didn't ride out here for conversation. No, Wade said plainly. I came for her. Clara's hand went to her revolver. Why? You're worth something, Miss Foster. There's a judge down in Del Harrow who's got a bounty on you. Claims you shot his son 2 years back. Name's Lester Harrow. Clara's breath caught. That's a lie. Maybe, but the bounty's real. $10,000. Dead or alive. Wade's men adjusted in their saddles. One slid a hand toward his belt. Colt cocked the rifle. You're not taking her, he said. Wade raised a hand. Didn't come to spill blood. But I'm not leaving empty-handed. She's under my protection. Wade laughed a low, dry sound. You think that matters to a man who's buried 6 marshals and bought 10 judges? I think, Colt said, you ought to leave while your boots are still dry. Wade's face went still. Behind Colt, Clara whispered, We can't fight them head-on. He replied without turning, We won't. In one motion he fired. The shot punched through the thigh of the rider in the red scarf, knocking him from his horse. Chaos erupted. The third man drew fast, but Clara had her revolver ready. She fired once, missed. The second shot took him in the shoulder. Wade ducked behind his horse, returning fire. Bullets splintered the porch beam. Colt grabbed Clara's arm and pulled her back inside. Back door, he said. They burst out into the cold wind, darting behind the shed. Smoke from the fire miles off curled faintly in the sky. Their horses were tethered by the creek. They'll regroup, Clara said. Not if we make them think we're already gone. They moved fast, riding north through the brush. Wade wouldn't chase blindly. He'd circle, set traps. Clara's mind raced with old memories. Tricks her father used to teach her. Ways to move unseen. How to double back without leaving tracks. They rode hard until twilight. Then Colt led them up an old mining trail, hidden beneath brambles and loose shale. By full dark, they reached a narrow cleft in the cliffs above the valley, an old lookout post from when Colt had once tracked rustlers through these hills. They made no fire, ate jerky in silence. The cold was biting, but neither complained. I know that judge, Claire said finally. Harrow. He was the one who tried to buy our land. My father refused. Weeks later, men in hoods came with torches. Colt looked at her. You think Harrow hired Grieve? She nodded. And now he's using Wade to finish the job. Colt exhaled. Then we'll finish it first. The next morning they rode south, not away from the threat, but toward it. Toward Del Harrow. Del Harrow was not a town, but a scar. Rows of buildings black with soot, windows shuttered like the eyes of the dead. Clara could feel the weight of history here. Old injustice hung like a shroud. They dismounted 2 miles out. Colt buried their supplies beneath a cluster of rocks. Clara tied her braid back, tucked the revolver in her belt. Her hands no longer shook. They moved like ghosts, avoiding the road, keeping to gullies and fences until they reached the courthouse square. The building stood tall, polished, proud. Inside, Justice wore a borrowed mask. Colt knew where to go. The saloon across from the courthouse. That's where Wade would be waiting, and where Harrow would eventually show his face. Inside, the place was quiet. Too quiet. They entered together. At the far table sat Wade Kellum, coat slung over his chair, hat resting beside a bottle. He looked up. Took you long enough. Colt aimed his rifle at Wade's chest. Tell Harrow to come down. Wade smiled. Already here. From the back room, a man emerged. Tall, silver hair, dressed in velvet and smugness. His eyes were cold as winter ash. Well, he said, the ghosts return. You tried to burn out the memory, Claire said, but fire doesn't destroy everything. Sometimes it sharpens it. You're wanted for murder, Harrow said smoothly. I have a warrant. Witnesses. You paid for those lies, she said, just like you paid Grieve. He shrugged. Prove it. I intend to. Colt stepped forward. unrolling a packet of documents, a ledger they'd taken from Greaves' body, names and dates, matching payouts from Harrow's estate. Proof of payment for violence. Wade looked at it and cursed softly. You buried this, Colt said, but truth doesn't rot easy. Harrow reached for his pistol, but Clara was faster. She fired once. Harrow dropped to the floor, clutching his leg. The saloon roared with confusion. Wade stood, arms raised, expression unreadable. I'm done with this, Wade said. I ain't dying for a man who pays cowards to kill girls. He walked out. Colt tied Harrow's hands with curtain cord. You'll hang this time. I own this town, Harrow spat. Not anymore, Claire said. It was over by sundown. The townsfolk, once silent in fear, gathered. Read the ledger. Saw the truth. The sheriff, long bought and bitter, surrendered his badge to the next man brave enough to wear it. Clara stood by the gallows 2 days later, coat buttoned tight, watching Harrow let up the steps. He never looked at her, just kept muttering about land and bloodlines and curses. But none of it mattered anymore. Colt stood beside her, not as protector, not as penance, as her equal, as her future. And when the rope snapped taut and the crowd exhaled, it wasn't triumph Clara felt. It was release, the kind that left room for something else, something just beginning.